Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most alarming and decisive moments of the ongoing war. The fall of Pokrovsk, a city that Ukraine fought desperately to protect, and one that NATO framed as a strategically critical point in the Donetsk region. What happened in Pokrovsk has shocked analysts, surprised military planners, and sparked intense debate about Ukraine's defensive strategy, Russia's evolving tactics, and NATO's real level of influence in the conflict. The fall of this city is more than a frontline shift. It represents a psychological and tactical blow that has reshaped expectations for the next phase of the war. For months, Pokrovsk stood as one of Ukraine's strongest western outposts in Donetsk, positioned as both a defensive shield and a logistical artery. Supplies, reinforcements, evacuations, and artillery support frequently moved through this hub, which is why NATO repeatedly emphasized its importance. When the city started to come under increasing pressure, Ukraine and its partners had hoped the support being poured into the region would prevent any collapse. But the speed at which Russian troops advanced, combined with new battlefield tactics and overwhelming firepower, created a scenario that even Ukrainian commanders privately admit was difficult to counter. Russia's campaign to capture Pokrovsk wasn't a single strike. It was a steady, suffocating pressure that built up over weeks. Drone swarms, relentless artillery, glide bomb strikes, and infantry pushes slowly chipped away Ukrainian positions. While some analysts believed Ukraine could hold the line for months, the real conditions on the ground told a different story. Units were tired, ammunition was limited, and reinforcements were delayed or insufficient. Even though NATO offered intelligence, equipment, and advisory support, Ukraine faced the same fundamental challenge it has faced for 2 years. Russia simply had more men, more shells, and more machinery to throw into the fight. The collapse began gradually when key defensive trenches north and east of Pokrovsk started taking heavier than normal bombardments. Several Ukrainian brigades reported that Russian drones were flying in patterns they had not seen before, indicating improved coordination and surveillance. These drones weren't only spotting for artillery, they were dropping explosives directly onto trenches, vehicles, and ammunition storage points. This forced Ukraine to use their own drones defensively instead of offensively, reducing their strike capacity. As these attacks increased, Ukrainian defense lines began to thin, and suddenly the cracks started to widen. One of the most devastating elements was Russia's use of guided glide bombs. These massive weapons, sometimes around 500 kilograms or more, are dropped from aircraft that never enter Ukrainian missile range. Once released, they glide dozens of kilometers and smash into targets with such force that even heavily fortified positions crumble. Pokrovsk, once thought safe from large-scale air attacks due to Ukrainian air defenses in the west, became a prime victim of these bombs. Entire blocks were flattened, command posts had to relocate continuously, communication lines broke repeatedly. The psychological effect on troops was enormous. While the defense struggled, Ukraine desperately tried to move reinforcements into the city. But Russia's long-range strikes targeted rail stations, convoys, and supply roads. NATO intelligence warned about these patterns, but Ukraine had limited options. The routes were predictable and narrow. Every attempt to bring in more troops, more ammunition, or more medical support was met with overwhelming Russian counter-fire. This created a situation where Ukrainian units on the front line were effectively isolated, fighting with whatever they had left. When Russia began the final push into Pokrovsk, Ukrainian resistance was fierce but exhausted. Units that had been in combat for weeks without rotation faced waves of Russian infantry supported by armored vehicles and continuous drone surveillance. The Russian strategy was simple but brutally effective. Overwhelm one defensive line, force a retreat, then immediately bombard the new defensive line before it can be organized. Step by step, block by block, Ukraine found itself pushed deeper into the city with fewer options for counterattacks. Once the city center became contested, the battle took on a new intensity. Urban warfare drains manpower quickly. Every building becomes a fortress. Every street a death zone. Every movement a risk. Ukrainian forces attempted to hold strategic intersections and key structures, but their positions were constantly exposed by drones that hovered endlessly above. Russia's ability to combine these technologies with artillery strikes made it nearly impossible for Ukrainian troops to hold ground for long. Even when they inflicted heavy casualties on Russian assault groups, the pressure never slowed. One of the most critical moments came when Ukrainian commanders decided they could no longer guarantee a stable supply flow into the city. Ammunition was low. Medical evacuation was nearly impossible. Troops were running out of drone support, which had been their most valuable defensive tool. The decision was made to withdraw to secondary defensive lines west of the city. This withdrawal was not a full retreat, but a tactical necessity to prevent encirclement, which has previously resulted in catastrophic losses in places like Debaltseve or Mariupol. However, this withdrawal was not orderly. Russian forces pushed aggressively to cut off the retreating Ukrainian units. Many soldiers had to escape through alternative, dangerous routes. Some units got separated. A few were almost surrounded before breaking out. The reports from the ground indicate chaos mixed with bravery. Ukrainian troops were determined to save lives and equipment while preventing total collapse. When the Russian flag was raised over key positions in Pokrovsk, the shockwaves spread beyond the region. Ukrainian analysts immediately pointed out that losing this city was not simply about territory, it was about momentum. Russia now has a more direct route to push further west, threatening larger urban centers and key supply points. If this momentum isn't stopped, the next phase of the war could tilt even more in Russia's favor. NATO's involvement has been scrutinized heavily since the fall. Critics argue that while NATO provides equipment, training, and intelligence, there is still a hesitation to supply the kind of volume Ukraine needs. Some nations are cautious about escalating the conflict, while others are simply running out of stockpiles. The debate highlights a growing issue. Ukraine's needs have become larger than NATO's willingness or ability to fully support in real time. That imbalance contributed to what happened in Pokrovsk. For Ukraine, the fall of Pokrovsk is a painful reminder of the challenges ahead. War fatigue is real, both for soldiers on the front line and civilians across the country. Mobilization issues, training delays, and equipment shortages continue to slow Ukraine's response to Russia's constant pressure. The government now faces renewed calls to overhaul defense strategies, strengthen domestic production of weapons, and rethink how they allocate their limited resources. Russia, on the other hand, is using the victory as a propaganda tool. Officials claim it as proof of their inevitable success and a sign that the Russian army is stronger than ever. While some of these claims are exaggerated, there is no denying that capturing Pokrovsk gives Russia a significant strategic and symbolic win. It boosts morale among Russian troops and increases pressure on Ukraine diplomatically. International reactions have been mixed. Some Western nations express concern and promise more support, while others quietly question whether Ukraine can maintain long-term resistance without deeper structural changes. The fall of Pokrovsk has forced global leaders to reevaluate their positions, strategies, and expectations. It has also raised fears about the next major city that might be targeted and whether Ukraine can mount a stronger defense. Despite these setbacks, Ukraine is not defeated. The military still controls significant territory and continues to adapt, innovate, and resist. The fall of Pokrovsk may trigger new tactics, faster reforms, and a renewed push for international assistance. This moment could become a turning point, not just in terms of what Ukraine lost, but in how Ukraine responds. Ukraine has already begun strengthening defensive lines to the west, improving fortifications, and increasing drone production to compensate for losses. Commanders are studying what went wrong and what can be done differently. The country understands that every mistake must become a lesson, and every loss must fuel determination. The people of Ukraine continue to show resilience, courage, and a refusal to give up. Civilians evacuated from Pokrovsk carry heartbreaking stories of destruction, fear, and helplessness. Yet many express hope that their city will one day be liberated. This spirit is one of Ukraine's strongest weapons, even when the battlefield situation appears grim. As we look to the future, Pokrovsk stands as a warning and a reminder. Wars are not won simply by equipment or alliances, but by preparation, cohesion, and the ability to adapt quickly. Ukraine must do all of these things simultaneously, while Russia pushes harder than ever. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned as we continue to cover every major development in this evolving conflict. The fall of Pokrovsk is not the end of the story. It is the start of a new and uncertain chapter. If you want description, hashtags, tags, image prompts, thumbnail prompts, or alternative titles, just say Janny full package, and I'll prepare everything